Welcome to English Easy Hub. Join us as we ignite the flames of your English learning journey together.
Please subscribe to watch and embark on your English learning journey. Don't miss out on the exciting content. In this conversation, Simon engages with his professor to explore the intricacies of slang in modern English across different cultures. The dialogue delves into the rapid evolution of slang, its cultural and regional variations, and the role of social media and pop culture in spreading slang globally. The discussion also highlights the challenges of using slang appropriately, especially in professional and cross-cultural settings, and the importance of understanding the context, history, and nuances behind slang terms.
Hi, Professor. I've been really interested in understanding how slang works across different cultures, especially in modern English. I think it's fascinating how slang evolves and how it can vary so much depending on where you are. Could you give me some insights into why slang changes so rapidly in different cultural contexts?
That's a great observation, Simon. Slang is indeed a dynamic aspect of language, and its rapid evolution is largely due to its informal nature. Unlike standard language, which tends to be more stable, slang reflects the social, political, and cultural shifts in society. When you think about different cultures, each has its own set of experiences and influences, which shape the way people communicate. This is why slang can vary not just from one country to another, but even within different regions of the same country. Social media, music, and pop culture are also huge accelerators of this change. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Professor. I hadn't considered the influence of pop culture and social media as much. Do you think that certain cultures are more influential in creating slang that spreads globally? For example, American slang seems to be quite dominant. Why is that?
You're spot on, Simon. American slang does have a significant global influence, largely due to the country's cultural exports. The dominance of Hollywood, American music, especially genres like hip-hop, and social media platforms headquartered in the U.S. means that American slang often travels faster and farther than slang from other cultures. However, it's important to note that other cultures are also contributing to the global slang lexicon. For instance, K-pop and anime have introduced many Korean and Japanese slang terms to global audiences. So, while American slang might be more visible, it's not the only player on the field.
That's really interesting. So, would you say that the spread of slang also depends on how cool or trendy a culture is perceived to be? How do trends influence the adoption of slang words in different cultures?
Trends definitely play a key role in the spread of slang. Slang often emerges from subcultures that are perceived as edgy, innovative, or cool, and then it gets adopted by the mainstream. For example, a lot of American slang comes from African American Vernacular English, AV, which has been popularized through hip-hop culture. When a particular subculture or trend gains mainstream attention, its language tends to follow suit. However, the adoption of slang can also be influenced by a culture's openness to external influences. In some societies, there's a stronger inclination to preserve traditional language, which might slow down the adoption of foreign slang.
That makes sense. I've also noticed that slang can sometimes be misunderstood or used incorrectly by people from different cultures, especially when they try to adopt slang from another language. What are some common pitfalls that people should be aware of when trying to use slang from another culture?
That's a very perceptive point, Simon. Misusing slang can indeed lead to misunderstandings or even offense. One common pitfall is using slang without fully understanding its context or connotations. Slang is often tied to specific cultural or social contexts, so using a word out of context can make you sound inauthentic or disrespectful. Another issue is that slang can be highly localized. What's considered cool or appropriate in one region might be outdated or inappropriate in another. For instance, some slang words in American English might have entirely different meanings in British English. It's always a good idea to observe how native speakers use slang in context before incorporating it into your own speech.
I'll definitely keep that in mind. Speaking of context, how important is it to understand the history or origins of a slang word before using it? Does knowing the background of a slang term help in using it more appropriately?
Understanding the history or origins of a slang term can be incredibly valuable, Simon. Knowing where a word comes from often provides insight into its nuances and the communities that created it. This knowledge can help you use the term more appropriately and sensitively. For example, understanding that certain slang terms in English originate from marginalized communities can help you appreciate the cultural significance behind them and avoid appropriating or trivializing them. In some cases, knowing the history of a term can also help you avoid using slang that might be offensive or outdated.
That's really insightful. I hadn't thought about the cultural sensitivity aspect as much. Are there any strategies you would recommend for staying up to date with slang, especially given how quickly it changes?
Staying current with slang is definitely a challenge, but there are a few strategies you can use. First, immerse yourself in the culture where the slang originates. This could mean watching TV shows, listening to music, or following social media influencers who are at the forefront of language trends. Engaging with native speakers and asking them about new slang can also be very helpful. Additionally, online resources like Urban Dictionary can be useful, though you should use them with caution, as entries can vary in accuracy. Lastly, always keep an open mind and be willing to adapt, as slang can change rapidly, and what's trendy today might be outdated tomorrow.
Those are great tips, Professor. I'll try to integrate them into my learning. One last question: how can one use slang effectively in a professional setting without coming across as unprofessional? Is there a way to strike a balance?
That's an excellent question, Simon. Using slang in a professional setting can be tricky, but it's not impossible. The key is to be mindful of your audience and the context. In more casual or creative industries, using some slang might help you connect with your colleagues or clients and demonstrate that you're in tune with current trends. However, in more formal environments, it's usually best to limit your use of slang and stick to standard language. If you do choose to use slang, make sure it's appropriate for the context and that it doesn't undermine your professionalism. Subtlety is often key. Using slang sparingly and in the right moments can actually enhance your communication by making it more relatable without compromising your credibility.
I see. So it's more about knowing when and where to use it. But what about when you're trying to connect with a younger audience? For instance, if you're in a leadership role and you want to engage younger team members, would using slang be a good strategy?
Great point, Simon. When trying to connect with a younger audience, using slang can indeed help bridge generational gaps. It shows that you're attuned to their world, which can make you more relatable. However, it's crucial to be genuine. If you overuse slang or use it awkwardly, it can come across as trying too hard, which might actually distance you from your audience. A good strategy is to listen carefully to how your younger colleagues use slang and subtly incorporate it into your communication when appropriate. This way, you can blend authenticity with relatability.
That's very helpful, Professor. I can see how being observant and adapting to the situation is key. But what about the role of regional slang? For instance, I've heard that certain slang terms can have completely different meanings in different English-speaking countries. How does one navigate these differences, especially in an international setting?
Regional slang differences are indeed a significant consideration, Simon. When communicating in an international context, It's important to be aware that the same word or phrase might have different connotations in different regions. For example, the word boot refers to the trunk of a car in British English, while in American English, it's a type of footwear. Misunderstandings can arise if you're not familiar with these differences. The best approach is to be cautious and, when in doubt, ask for clarification. If you're working with an international team, it might be beneficial to stick to more neutral language or explicitly clarify the meaning when using regional slang.
I hadn't thought about that. It must be especially challenging for non-native English speakers who are trying to learn slang from multiple regions. What advice would you give to someone in that situation?
That's a very thoughtful question, Simon. For non-native speakers, navigating slang from different regions can indeed be challenging. My advice would be to focus on mastering slang from one region first, preferably the one most relevant to their personal or professional life. Once they're comfortable with that, they can gradually expand their understanding of slang from other regions. It's also helpful to engage with media from different regions. Watching shows or movies and listening to music from the UK, the US, Australia, etc. can expose them to a variety of slang and context. And again, asking native speakers for clarification or examples can be very beneficial.
That's really practical advice. It's fascinating how slang can be so diverse even within the same language. Do you think there's a point where slang can become so localized that it's almost like a different language entirely?
You're touching on an interesting concept, Simon. In some cases, slang can indeed become so localized that it's almost unintelligible to outsiders, even those who speak the same language. This often happens in tight-knit communities or subcultures where slang develops as a form of in-group communication. Over time, these slang terms can evolve into something akin to a dialect with its own unique vocabulary and expressions. However, these forms of communication usually remain within the group and don't spread widely. But it's a fascinating example of how language can evolve and fragment based on social dynamics.
That's amazing to think about. Language is so fluid and adaptable. But I wonder, is there a downside to using too much slang? Could it potentially harm one's communication skills or ability to engage with a broader audience?
That's a very insightful question, Simon. While slang can be a powerful tool for connecting with specific groups, overusing it can indeed have drawbacks. If you rely too heavily on slang, you might find that your language becomes less accessible to those outside your immediate social circle or subculture. This can limit your ability to communicate effectively with a broader audience. Additionally, excessive use of slang can sometimes be perceived as a lack of professionalism or seriousness, especially in formal settings. It's all about balance, using slang to enhance your communication, while also maintaining the clarity and versatility of your language.
That makes a lot of sense. I suppose it's all about finding that balance between being relatable and being clear. Do you think slang has a role in academic or intellectual discussions, or is it better left out of those contexts?
Slang can have a place in academic or intellectual discussions, but it must be used carefully. In these contexts, the primary goal is often clarity and precision, so using standard language is generally preferable. However, if you're discussing topics related to culture, language, or social dynamics, incorporating slang can be relevant and even necessary. It can help illustrate points more vividly or connect the discussion to real-world examples. The key is to ensure that the slang terms are clearly defined and that their use enhances, rather than detracts from, the overall discussion.
I hadn't thought of that. So, in a way, slang can serve as a bridge between academic theory and everyday life, but it needs to be used with intention and care.
Exactly, Simon. Slang, like any other linguistic tool, has its place and purpose. When used thoughtfully, it can enrich communication and provide deeper insights into cultural practices and social trends. But, as with any tool, it's important to use it wisely and in the appropriate context. Understanding the nuances of when and how to use slang is a valuable skill, especially in today's globalized world where language is constantly evolving.
This conversation has given me so much to think about, Professor. I feel like I have a much better grasp on the complexities of slang and how it functions across different cultures and contexts. Thank you for all the insights.
You're very welcome, Simon. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you. Your curiosity and thoughtful questions show a deep interest in language, which is wonderful to see. Keep exploring and engaging with these ideas, and you'll continue to deepen your understanding. If you have any more questions in the future, don't hesitate to reach out.
This conversation provides valuable insights into the dynamic nature of slang and its significance in modern communication. It emphasizes the importance of cultural sensitivity, adaptability, and intentionality when using slang, particularly in diverse or professional environments. The professor's guidance highlights that while slang can be a powerful tool for connection and expression, it requires careful consideration to ensure it enhances rather than hinders communication. Simon leaves the discussion with a deeper understanding of how to navigate the complexities of slang in a globalized world, recognizing the balance needed to use it effectively across different contexts.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share to keep the English learning journey alive.